if you've ever wanted to do webinars or you're doing webinars as part of your marketing, measuring the effectiveness on that in HubSpot can be a challenge. Actually, it can be a challenge regardless of what platform you use. But I'm going to show you a couple things that I've run into in reporting on webinars and some things that I think are an advantage when you move to a HubSpot Databox, and also some ways in HubSpot that you have to make sure you understand what's going on to get the full benefit of how all this pulls together. So first of all, when you're using Zoom, so for the instances that I'm talking about, we do a webinar once a month at least, or sometimes twice a month. And every single time you do a new webinar, it actually then syncs automatically with the Zoom integration into these marketing events. So from a high level, you can see the name, the description, you can see total registrations, attendees, and no-shows. So if I'm just trying to get a glimpse at this, like I've got this one area here, which is helpful, but again, doesn't come with the rest of the data. You can also dig into these marketing events, and if you have other things associated with it from a campaign perspective, you can see that here as well. But again, that gives you a little bit of a like a one area, but now I can't see the rest of the data I'm trying to look at, such as, sources and where they came from and all of that. The things that you have in HubSpot to get as far as fields that you can report on, we've got these or actually like create views in Databox are going to be these different fields here. And then we've got one that we added in here, and I'm going to talk about that here in a second. So the things that Zoom pulls through as far as property creation is going to be this webinar attendance duration, last registered webinar, total number of webinars they registered for, and then total number attended. So the reason this is helpful when you first start a webinar is imagine you have a webinar, they registered for 1, but they attended 0. That number in and of itself is a really good thing to report on right then. However, the more webinars that you do, now all of a sudden this data represents the summative behavior of them across the entire lifeline or lifetime of webinars, and then you only ever get their last registered Zoom webinar. So if you actually then create additional fields, which stamps those fields with whether or not they registered, that's also driven by list behavior. Again, we don't have to get into the mechanics here, but you can see there's a lot of moving parts when you're trying to report on this webinar behavior. So, some people initially, they're going to use, so right now we've actually got a list is what's driving the reporting of this specific webinar. So because that they go through a HubSpot form, they get added to a list, and the list is then how we show how many folks are registered and where their life cycle stage is. So again, if I were making a assumption on how effective these webinars are, we've got 96 of our leads that came, but I don't again know how many came for the first time. Again, I can report on this in HubSpot as well, but as you can see, it starts to be a little disjointed. So now I'm getting into a list. As you can see here, these are the other types of properties that we can now segment on. So reporting and segmentation, two separate things. I can use the segmenting to build a HubSpot list that then actually takes this information and is what fuels the stamping of the actual webinar they attended. So now that I've got all of this stuff in one place, like the dashboard is one thing I can create in HubSpot, but the reason I moved myself over into Databox is because now I've also got details from Zoom webinars. So I've also got things like the attendee report, registration. I've got Q&As that were answered. I've actually got the survey. So I can actually export these into a spreadsheet and upload them into their own data sources in Databox. And then what you end up with is a dashboard more like this. So I've got the webinar registrations that I just showed you. I've also got these first conversions. So this is actually the person that came to this webinar, and this was their very first conversion with us. So if I wanted to dig deeper into this, I could look at that here. I've got a big source of all of our registration is social. I know this. So I'm actually not looking to get insight on other sources because we drive a lot of our activity by YouTube. And so if you hover over this, you'll see 59 of the total contacts that registered actually converted for the first time as a source in our HubSpot as a result of YouTube. So again, as I look at their other sources here, we've got YouTube and LinkedIn, and then we've got Google. And again, you can kind of hover over all these. This is something that I would show an executive team. If I'm here into HubSpot, what I've noticed is oftentimes like the amount of things that are on the screen often cause distraction, and then I can't display it the one I want. The thing I do like in HubSpot is I can actually click into the lead and actually see all of the people that fit that criteria. So it's very actionable from a sales standpoint. This is really helpful when I'm looking at like the overall performance and kind of strategic breakdown. I can also embed, what the survey feedback was as a result of that data. This webinar feedback is as a result of that data, that specific data source that was the spreadsheet that I uploaded. Again, it's the same every single time. So I could actually clone this and then add new data sources for my next month. And then just for historical value, I can add in the registration page and replay page so I can actually look to see what that webinar was about. How did we, talk about it on that page? And then overall, I can see that this is our registration behavior to attendance. I just showed 2 months here, but if I had this for the whole year, I can start to see, was there one where we actually saw, and how does that relate to how people, attended or registered and attended here? So just a couple things to think about. I really do like the ability to then loop those dashboards together. So if I wanted to actually then loop it with other webinars, so think about this. If this was our dashboard for June, and then I looped it with the one from May and the one from April, now I start to see and kind of flip back and forth between those views of the data, which I can't easily do here in reports. So forgive my dog for barking. She had something to say about that. But again, that's really helpful. So if you happen to be doing webinars with Zoom, feel free to take advantage of these reports here. You've got the HubSpot reports, and then you also have the ability to add in open fields and contextual information that makes it possible for you to just tell a much better story.